What if the debt crisis gripping nations around the world isn't a failure of leadership, but the fulfillment of a design? What if the reason governments can't balance their budgets, can't escape their deficits, can't pay down their debts, has nothing to do with politics or economics, and everything to do with a financial architecture built specifically to keep them owing forever? Because here's the paradox. Countries borrow even in years of growth. Debt rises even when tax revenue surges. Interest costs balloon even when central banks claim inflation is under control. And the world has reached a point where over 90% of nations owe more than they can realistically repay. Is this chaos, or is this structure? Today, we're uncovering the hidden financial architecture designed to make national debt not a temporary burden, but a permanent condition. And the deeper you go, the more you realize this isn't just about money, it's about power. Section 1, the origin. When debt transformed into control. To understand why nations can't escape their debts today, we need to revisit the moment global finance changed forever. In the late 19th and early 20th century, as industrial nations expanded, governments struggled with three challenges: war expenses, infrastructure demands, unpredictable revenue cycles. They needed stable financing. Private banks had the capital, but not the authority, to supply unlimited funds. So countries created central banks, institutions that could issue currency, manage reserves, and stabilize markets. But buried beneath this mission was a subtle shift. Instead of governments printing money directly, they now borrowed money created by central banks.
Oh.
Governments didn't create the money they used. They owed the money they used. Once this structure was in place, national debt became inevitable. Because if money enters the economy as debt, the economy must stay in debt to function.
8.
This is the foundational twist most people never learn. Money is not just a medium of exchange. Money is an IOU. Governments borrow it. Banks create it. Citizens earn it. But the system always demands more. And that demand is the first pillar of the hidden architecture. Section 2. The rise. How global debt became a permanent business model. The next major shift came with the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944. World leaders needed a stable structure to rebuild global trade after World War II. The solution? Fix currencies to the US dollar, fix the dollar to gold. Create institutions to manage global lending and deficits. This is where the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and World Bank enter the story. Their official mission: prevent financial crises and help countries grow. Their unofficial effect: lock developing nations into cycles of borrowing, repayment, and conditional reforms that favor creditors. By the 1960s, countries relied heavily on foreign loans. By the 1970s, interest rates surged. By the 1980s, a global debt crisis erupted. The IMF stepped in with rescue packages, loans with strings attached, privatized state assets, cut social programs, increased taxes, open markets to foreign investors, eliminate subsidies, deregulate entire industries. These policies drained public wealth, enriched outside investors, and made nations more dependent on future loans. Debt became a revenue stream, a recurring payment, a business model. And if nations refused IMF guidelines, they were shut out of global markets. This was the second pillar of the architecture. Debt isn't just money owed, it's leverage used to shape national policy. But the system was only getting started. Section 3, the breaking point. When debt outgrew the real economy, the real crisis began after 1971. When the US ended the dollar's gold convertibility, suddenly, money had no anchor. It wasn't tied to gold. It wasn't tied to production. It was tied only to debt. This unleashed a wave of global lending. Central banks could create limitless currency. Commercial banks could multiply credit through fractional reserves. Governments could borrow without constraints. Investors could buy sovereign bonds as safely as cash. Debt became the world's most profitable product. From 1970 to 2024, global debt didn't just grow, it exploded. 1970 to $3 trillion, 1990, $37 trillion, 2010, $173 trillion today, over $315 trillion. This amount can never be repaid. Not through growth, not through taxes, not through inflation. But that's the point. Because when debt becomes unpayable, nations must refinance, restructure, roll over loans, increase, borrow, acknowledge, negotiate terms, accept external conditions, and the architects of the system profit every time. This is the third pillar. Debt is designed to be permanent because permanent debt creates permanent influence. Section 4. The fallout. Who benefits when nations can't escape debt? When a nation becomes trapped in structural debt. The consequences ripple across every part of its economy, but the outcomes are surprisingly consistent. 1. Creditors gain political leverage. Institutions like central banks, foreign lenders, and multilateral organizations influence laws, trade policies, and national budgets. 2. National assets become collateral. Countries sell mineral rights, utilities, water, infrastructure, telecom companies, land, energy systems. Privatization becomes a requirement, not a choice. 3. Citizens bear the cost. Austerity hits public services. Healthcare declines, education budgets shrink, unemployment rises, poverty deepens while debt payments continue uninterrupted. 4. National currency becomes unstable as debt grows. Countries face inflation, currency devaluation, capital flight, rising import costs, which leads to even more borrowing. 5. Debt holders earn guaranteed returns no matter the crisis. Bonds must be repaid. Interest must be paid. Markets must be served. It's a cycle where lenders face minimal risk because governments cannot default without collapsing. Debt becomes the most secure investment on earth, and nations become tenants in a system they no longer own. Section 5. Failed fixes. Why every attempt to escape debt makes it worse. Countries have tried everything to break free. Fiscal tightening, austerity, higher taxes, spending cuts, currency devaluations, bailouts, privatization, structural reforms, but these solutions only deepen the problem. Why? Because the architecture ensures failure in 3 ways. 1. Austerity reduces growth. Cuts shrink economic activity, lowering tax revenue, increasing borrowing needs. 2. Inflation erodes stability when central banks print money to service debt. Inflation result interest payments rise with it. 3. Privatization removes national income sources. Selling state assets eliminates future revenue, increasing long-term dependence. In every scenario, countries return to the same lenders for more loans. Debt compounds. Dependency deepens. Control intensifies, and the architecture tightens. Section 6. Modern parallels. The pattern is still repeating. Look at today's world. The United States owes over $35 trillion. Japan owes over 250% of its GDP. The United Kingdom's interest payments are exploding. Italy, Greece, and France struggle with unsustainable deficits. Over 60 developing nations face risk of sovereign default. Debt servicing now consumes nearly 10% of global GDP, and in every case, the same pattern emerges. When nations face collapse, central banks intervene. When they intervene, markets stabilize temporarily. When markets stabilize, governments borrow more. And when they borrow more, the debt architecture grows stronger. The result? A world where nations are not sovereign. They are financial clients. And the lenders, central banks, bond markets, supranational institutions quietly shape the rules of global power. 3 takeaways. 1. Debt is not a mistake of governance. It's a structural feature of modern finance. System requires nations to borrow endlessly just to function. 2. Debt creates leverage far more powerful than military force. Through debt, creditors influence policy, control resources, and dictate national priorities. 3. The architecture is global, intentional, and self-reinforcing. Every crisis strengthens the system. Every intervention expands its reach. Every rescue increases dependency. Final warning: a world where nations are permanently owing is a world where sovereignty slowly dissolves. Not through invasion, not through elections, but through contracts, obligations, and compound interest. Debt is the quietest form of control ever invented, and the architecture that sustains it shows no signs of breaking. But here's the question that remains. What happens when the world's debt becomes so large that even the architects can no longer manage it? That moment is coming. And when it arrives, the reset won't be financial. It will be geopolitical. Call to action if you want to continue exploring how global debt systems work, who benefits from them, and how they shape the future of nations. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter. Because understanding the architecture is the first step to seeing the world clearly.